Hi, this is Catherine Schneider from the Fitchburg Historical Society. We're very excited getting ready for our spring program, which is going to be on Sunday, uh, April 14th at 1:30 at the Fitchburg Public Library. And of course, the program, as usual, is open to the public, and we are just so happy to invite everyone from the community to come to this very special program that we have this spring. And we are fortunate to have our two presenters here with us to kind of whet our appetite for the program that's coming up. So I'd like to introduce them. Elizabeth Leith, who is from the anthropology department at UW-Madison, and then her husband Luther Leith, who works with the museum archaeology program at the Wisconsin Historical Society. The program they're going to be presenting is a deep history of the Fitchburg area, 10,000 plus years of occupation. So I really think that title is fascinating and intriguing. I'd just like to get right into it with Liz and Luther and ask them to take apart that title of your talk for us, and then what it means to say that the Fitchburg area has been occupied for 10,000 years.
Sure, thank you. Well, when you think about the history of the area we're living in, we often highlight the most recent past, going back 300 or 400 years. It's important to remember, though, that people have occupied a majority of the globe for a lot longer than that, living complex lives, reinforcing their sense of community and group identity, and making an importance of place in the villages, towns, and cities that existed. During this talk, we hope to highlight the story in the Fitchburg area. This has been an important area to people for thousands of years, providing agricultural land, hunting resources, community gathering spaces for generations. To say that Fitchburg has been occupied for 10,000 years is our way of acknowledging this long history, but also challenging the audience to think past the current houses and the buildings and the roads that exist in that area today.
Yeah, I think it's important with the archaeological record showing that people were here for a long period of time. Just because there's not written records that document that history, there are cultural remains that show people were here and, in living lives. And the places that you want to live today were really similar to the places people wanted to live in the past. You want to live near water, you wanted to, have a lot of nature, you wanted to have a lot of resources available. So Fitchburg is in a really unique area near the lakes, and there's a lot of resources there for people going way back deep into history.
Great. And that deep history to think of 10,000 years, I think we often, as Liz was saying, do not think in terms of that length of time for human occupation right here in our area. Well, from my memory, I was thinking back to long ago when I was in fourth grade and taking Wisconsin history. I remember this vividly, we began by talking about the first European, Jean Nicolet, coming to Green Bay, and that was in 1634. I actually looked this up, and of course, finding Native Americans already there. So why is it important to understand more about Native peoples who lived here for thousands of years?
Well, we can always fall back on that statement that the more we understand about the past, the more we can prepare for the future. It's true. Understanding how past people live their everyday lives and utilize those resources around us teaches us a lot about how we can meet our physical and emotional needs today. Learning about what precipitated the invention of new technologies, agriculture and land management practices, and adaptations to the world around us can help guide our decisions and actions in the future. But there's more to it. Whether we outright think it or not, a lot of people desire to connect socially with others, and we often take group pride in our hometowns. We see this most clearly in those diehard fans and professional sports teams and school spirit to support your local high school. It's not surprising one of the first things people ask when you meet someone new is, where are you from? The greater Madison area, including Fitchburg, has been an important landmark for some of the indigenous tribes in Wisconsin, most notably the Ho-Chunk Nation. It's important to understand the meaning this area has to tribal members, to understand that those of us living here today aren't the only ones who take pride in the area that we live in. Just as we learn more about the new people we meet, we can paint a more holistic picture of the historic meaning of this place by learning more about the lives and cultural practices of not just today's occupants, but those who have lived here going back much further in time.
And I think looking at the past 10,000 years, if you think those first people that were here, documented archaeologically, were living during the glacial period, in a period much colder, much wetter than it is today. And then they lived through a fairly substantial climate change coming out of the glacial period. It got really hot and really dry. If you get out onto the plains, there was a 4,000-year drought. They lived through that. They lived through the climate ameliorating into what it is today. So understanding how those people were able to overcome those obstacles in the past, I think is really important for where we're living today. We've seen a lot of really weird weather and a lot of different things and a lot of changes, and people have been able to deal with that for thousands of years. So I think it's really important thinking about it in that deep time.
And to know that human beings are so able to make those changes over time that require significant adaptations. Human beings able to do that. Well,
they can stay with the one technology for quite a long time, but when they need, they can change and change fairly rapidly. So I think that's another important idea, is you can rely on what works, but when it stops working, humans have a lot of flexibility and can change pretty quick.
Thank you for that. Well, I am very curious about both of you in terms of how you got into your field, your interest in archaeology. Maybe actually defining it for us a little more precisely, and then what do you find most interesting about your field?
Do you want to take the definition, or you want me to?
Well, I can take the definition. It's been an ongoing thing in the liberal studies, where exactly archaeology fits. Does it fit with history? In about the 60s, some pioneering archaeologists at the time said, we're studying humans. We're studying past humans all the way back to the origin of what it is to be human. So they said we should be tied to anthropology. Anthropology is a study of humans. Archaeology is a study of humans through all time. So we could go back to early hominids. We could go back to Homo habilis or Australopithecines. They're still in our line. So to understand how they developed informs us on how we developed. So, it's kind of a quick and dirty definition of archaeology. I guess I can go first this time. It sounds odd. I was a history major and history and political science double major when I first started out, and I had a friend that studied abroad in Mesoamerica in Guadalajara, and she'd went on an archaeology dig or visit an archaeological site down there and came back and told me about it. And I'm like, so that's what it's called. I always watched a lot of PBS when I was a kid and was fascinated about Egypt and fascinated about the Mayas and fascinated about the archaeology. I just didn't have a term to put to it until my friend had studied abroad, and she came back, mentioned that, and I thought, this sounds like it'll be something really fun to do. I decided to do a field school to find out if I liked the field work before I actually got into it. I really enjoyed the field work. I thought it was fascinating to be able to pull out material from the ground that hadn't seen the light of day in hundreds of years or thousands of years or tens of thousands of years. And those were important items for those people. The last person that dropped it, that was a really important item to them. So, and it tells us a lot about humanity and how we've developed and how flexible we are as far as getting over challenges. So I thought, archaeology is fun. I've been a field archaeologist for most of my life. I've dug a lot of holes, a lot of holes with nothing in them, and a lot of holes with some really, really cool stuff in them. So,
uh,
that's me. That's why I got into it.
I can't follow that.
well, it's
This is a hard
treasure
question.
hunter. You're a treasure hunter, and you are finding these things that are fascinating for revealing humans and for all time. This is just really such a draw for you, Luther. Well, Liz, what's your story about how you got involved in this
I
field?
can't ever answer this question all that well. I've always had an interest in history, but I can't really pinpoint why or how I originally chose archaeology specifically. So I never really know how to answer that question. I do know I've always had an interest in museum studies and curation. So that aspect of my job has always been of interest to me. I like that hands-on part of identifying artifacts and figuring out the best way to document, store, and make these artifacts come alive for other people, be it through exhibits or instruction or research. Secretly, I really love writing policies and procedures. I know that's not a draw for a lot of other people, but that's a thing for me. So that draws me to this part of my job too. The most interesting thing I like about what I do is the vast opening of possibilities of what I can learn about the collections that I manage. Each object or artifact is unique. It's made intentionally by someone and can tell a plethora of stories about it. Sure, some of it ends up being interpretation. We never know for sure what some of the artifacts that we find mean. But that's even true today. How else do we get our family legends and our tall tales that we tell within our families about how things came to be to talk to the younger generation? So whether it's a stone point or a hand-painted porcelain plate, there's always a story to uncover. And maybe it's that mystery that really draws me.
Mhm.
You
So
know,
you deal in
as
mystery
Liz was,
too, really.
Yeah, yeah.
The mystery of uncovering.
as Liz was talking about that, I thought maybe an easier definition for people to tie to archaeology. It's hands-on history.
It
You
is.
can read a lot of stuff in the book, but to go out and actually see that this is the physical remains that the history is based on. So I thought, hands-on history, maybe that's an easier definition.
I like that because it's very easy to think, I think in terms of ourselves and what we honor in our own history with our families, and then transpose that to, oh my goodness, people had these things that they were using. Always people have had things that show who they are and what they're about. So thank you. That's a wonderful definition. Well, let me ask, if you're a resident of Fitchburg and you're hearing about this program coming up on the 14th, and you're kind of thinking, oh, I wonder, my reasons why I should come. It just sounds like an interesting program, but any particular things that could stir people's interest that you might want to mention for coming to the program?
Well, learning for learning's sake is never a bad thing. But I'd say this is a great chance to expand your knowledge about your own neighborhood. Who knows, maybe something you learn will stick with you well into the future that you never knew about the place that you're living in right now.
I don't know. I think fascination with people and a lot of Americans don't realize people were here for thousands of years. We were taught in school, manifest destiny, it's open country. There was nobody here, but no, there was actually people here. There were a lot of people here. And a lot of people living in really complex societies, as complex, if not more, than the societies the Europeans were coming from. So I think it'd be just fascinating to, if you're not familiar with it, to learn about that history of the community.
Very eye-opening, and you're two people who can open our eyes to these things too. So maybe last question, what you're looking forward to about your presentation at the Fitchburg communities with Fitchburg community on the 14th.
I'm always excited to share my knowledge, and my work has allowed me to learn a lot about this area of Wisconsin. However, I also like learning from others wherever I go. The history of any one place is never really fully recorded. Someone always has a new story to tell. So I'm probably most looking forward to hearing about how living in Fitchburg has guided and influenced the lives of today's community, just like it has affected people far into the past.
So a good answer, Liz.
See, I stole your show this time.
Oh yeah. As an archaeologist, we're trained to be stewards of the past. I've always had a passion for archaeology once I figured out what it was. And I really love sharing my knowledge with people. But as an archaeologist, especially working at the Historical Society, our mission is to bring that information to you guys. If we dig up a bunch of stuff that's really cool and nobody else ever knows about it, why did we dig it up? You know, it's our, you know, duty to give you guys the information. So, I mean, that's what I feel like. And like Liz said, and like I said, I really like talking about archaeology and talking about the past with people.
Great, great. Well, I am super excited, especially after having this conversation with both of you for hearing your presentation and just thanking you so much for taking the time today to be with us to get us excited about the program. So I'll just repeat: deep history of the Fitchburg area, 10,000 years of occupation. And now we understand that so much more after speaking with Liz and Luther. And that will be at the Fitchburg Public Library, Sunday, April 14th, 1:30 p.m. So we just would welcome anyone from the community and everyone who would like to attend and be with us that day. So Liz and Luther, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for
thanks
having
for
us.
the offer.